Running an independent game studio can be incredibly tough. To be successful requires a team to have an almost impossible blend of qualities: tenacity, flexibility, stick-to-itiveness, positivity, and a healthy dose of hard-nosed business sense are essential. Drinkbox Studios carved out a name for itself as one of Toronto's most successful indie developers for all of those qualities. And on top of that, the games they've created are distinct, both in art direction and in having memorable, enjoyable mechanics. Nobody Saves the World, Drinkbox's latest, is an addictively fun dungeon crawler that got under my skin in the best way possible.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to another brand new episode of The Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. And if you'd like to support us in a more complete fashion, consider joining our Patreon. Link for that on screen right now or down in the box below. But look, I digress. I love this time of year. It is the perfect time to catch up on my entire backlog. And I finally get a chance to showcase a bunch of indies that I've been looking forward to here on my channel. I am a massive fan of Drinkbox Studios, and after having featured Nobody Saves the World, their newest game, during IndieLand this last fall, I have been eagerly awaiting for the game's official release. And here it is today. Let's get to it. I might not be a nobody, but do I want to save the world? Is that too corny? Maybe. I don't know. Let's begin! Yes!
All glory goes to the winner! Game over. Wake up! Last one standing wins. K.O.
How do you measure how good a game is? Some people judge a game by the hour count they put into it. Others tie enjoyment to whether or not they can share that experience with someone else. And of course, you have to factor in what it feels like relative to pushing buttons and action happening on screen. You know, what video games are. I always use my personal judgment system based on how fulfilling it is to complete tasks in the game versus the difficulty of doing said tasks and whether or not the experience was aesthetically pleasing the entire time. Nobody Saves the World somehow manages to hit that sweet spot of all of the things that make video games fun to play. And I think a lot of that comes down to the way Drinkbox operates. Sometimes sticking to your guns can be seen as a negative quality. When a group of creatives is overly stubborn, nothing gets done. But in the early days of Drinkbox, their single-mindedness and devotion to quality helped them stand out. I have always enjoyed their games on a surface level, but from a business perspective, this studio is savvy as hell, and I have respect for that. Graham Smith, co-founder of Drinkbox Studios, talked in a Polygon interview 10-ish years ago about some business decisions that allowed the studio to save money to create games that his co-workers would eventually want to play themselves. This involved accepting some timed exclusive deals with Sony and also holding out on publishing deals until the offer was sweet enough. And in the early years, Drinkbox worked on external contracts, and bit by bit, they built up enough capital to create the games they wanted to make. The results speak for themselves. About a Blob, Guacamelee, its sequel, and Severed are all amazing standout titles. But Nobody Saves the World is Drinkbox's biggest, most ambitious title yet, from both a gameplay and story perspective. One of my favorite things about Drinkbox games is that they tend to have a very distinct style and sensibility. It's a special mix of humor and meta commentary on gaming culture. Nobody Saves the World strikes a specific tone in its plot. From the very beginning, our player character, a creepy, pale little white walker-looking motherfucker, wakes up in a basement not knowing who they are, where they are, and why they are where they are. Soon enough, it becomes clear that the powerful wizard Nostramagus is MIA, and the great calamity has fallen upon the land. Compelled to do something to stop this, our nobody hero decides to step up and do whatever they can to save the world. Turns out, the answer is gathering up 5 crystal shards to restore a magical gem that just might quell the evil encroaching on the land. Nobody Saves the World is unlike anything else that Drinkbox has released up until this point. It's an action RPG, a very cheeky take on top-down dungeon crawlers similar to Diablo. But rather than being loot-driven, players get their dopamine hit by fulfilling quests and ranking up their playable characters. This game has classes, and unlike Gauntlet, where the player chooses a character class and grinds that character forever, Nobody Saves the World encouraged me to swap between classes on the fly all the time. Every class has its strengths, weaknesses, and special moves, and for completion, I had to experience every single one of them to its fullest extent. Now, this might sound like a ton of content, and it kind of is, but fortunately, it didn't come as an unwelcome surprise. Having streamed this game during my charity event Indieland and developing a little rapport with the developers, I had a handle on what to expect. As a huge fan of games that inspired this one, I really appreciated what Drinkbox was trying to do here. There are dozens of quests to fulfill, and they're introduced with alarming frequency. Each class has different passive and active abilities that unlock as you rank up the classes. Character classes start out at F rank, and completing quests fill up a CP meter. Filling up this meter improves the rank all the way up to S class. Class quests generally involve using specific moves or defeating enemies in certain ways, sometimes combining moves from other character pools to mix match and create more and more diversity. Outside of class-related quests, there are side quests provided by NPCs and different guilds throughout the world. The sheer amount of stuff to do in Nobody Saves the World might seem a little overwhelming at first, but it's actually laid out extremely cleanly and never feels like a chore ever. Completing this game on Xbox meant that there were going to be achievements to unlock, and there is a new game plus element to contend with, as any good dungeon crawler would include. But the way that Nobody Saves the World pays tribute to its predecessors meant that completion was something very well within my grasp. As packed as this map is, and as completely stuffed as the quest log eventually becomes, I felt compelled to complete Nobody Saves the World because of how much fun Drinkbox clearly had creating this game. The humor comes through, the meta commentary totally lands for me. But the most important thing that Drinkbox nails is that every single class feels incredibly fun to play, no matter how weird they may be. Nobody Saves the World is one of those experiences where every single thing you do subtly funnels players towards completing it, and in doing so, having the best possible experience as a player. Often, completing games means going out of my way to do something that no one in their right mind would ever want to do. But with Nobody Saves the World, I wanted to chase down every new quest as soon as I could. I feel like every little objective I finished gave me an adrenaline boost, and cumulatively made the experience of completion a genuinely pleasurable one. Now, the first thing that made me want to keep progressing through the game was the humor. This is a really well-written and often genuinely funny game. Drinkbox titles have their own specific brand of humor, and it translates perfectly to the fantastical world of the dungeon crawler. Everything from the names of skills and passive abilities, to location names, to characters, they all end up becoming some kind of in-joke about fantasy tropes or references to other gaming things. Is it overly referential? Maybe. Do I love it anyways? Hell yeah, I do. It's like if a D&D sourcebook got thrown into a blender with Homestar Runner, and then it was poured into a glass and then garnished with the puree known as the Binding of Isaac. The resulting comedy is memey and full of internet jargon, and also some fun jabs at nerds like myself. But none of this feels out of place with the world the game establishes, or even too much over the line where it beats you over the head to remind you that, hey, you're a nerd, you like games, right? A vampire who has forced himself to love the taste of grape juice because he doesn't want to kill anyone. A vending machine that sells juice called Grapeyard Smash in the haunted zombie section of the map. I chuckled. I'm not ashamed to admit this. I love that the Thieves Guild forced me to grift and heist my way up the ladder to get in the good graces of its leader. I love that every night in the Knights Guild is a different flavor of proud moron. And I love that Nobody Saves the World doesn't take itself too seriously. The game's best humor, and the thing that really made me want to complete everything that I could, is linked to the classes. There are 18 classes in all. I started off as the Nobody, who has a basic weak slap attack, and that's it. but after just a minute of playtime, I unlocked the form of a rat. The rat has its own set of attacks and is small enough to squeeze through narrow gaps. Completing a few rat-specific quests, and that form ranks up, unlocking more forms to transform into. Before long, I was morphing into classic RPG staples like a ranger or a guard, to even far, far stranger ones. How about the form of horse? Maybe the dumbbell chucking baby oiled bodybuilder is more your speed. Or perhaps I can offer you a nice egg in this trying time. I was eager to complete quests and rake up each of my forms just because I couldn't wait to see what I would unlock next. I found myself changing forms more frequently than the Wonder Twins, which keeps everything feeling fresh. At least early on, every form brings with it specific goals, aka quests, to fulfill. These goals end up being simple as kill 50 enemies using the Rat's Gnaw skill, or use the Pierce ability of the Ranger's main attack to hit multiple baddies. Every time one of these goals is fulfilled, my player character gained experience points as well as class points. Earn enough class points and the form ranks up, providing access to new skills, ability slots, new classes altogether, and yes, more quests. Leveling up my player character provides the usual stat boost just to the base form. And the math is kind of weird because sometimes it does elevate the other characters and sometimes it doesn't. I never quite understood it, but at the end of the day, I had to trust the process in that if I leveled up my base stats, they somehow were distributed amongst all of the classes. At every turn, Nobody Saves the World asked me to be extremely flexible. As much as I grew to have a few favorite forms, Hello Bodybuilder, Necromancer, and the most powerful in my opinion, the Monk, I was forced to master every single form in the game, or at least become very familiar to fulfill that form's quests. Players are able to multi-class and can create really powerful builds. I could do things like give the Necromancer the Horse Stampede ability, or the Robot the ability to summon an army of rabbits and tigers to do its bidding. Trying to find a broken build is a classic of the genre, and it's great the way it's implemented here in the game. But even with multi-classing, I eventually encountered situations where I had to survive a battle as a being that I wasn't as comfortable with. And truth be told, I liked being pushed out of my comfort zone. Eventually, you'll encounter enemies in a dungeon or somewhere in the overworld that have these status wards on them. These wards can only be broken by specific types of attacks. And those attacks can be broken down into one of 4 types: sharp, blunt, dark, or light. If an enemy has the light ward, that enemy cannot be damaged at all until it is hit with a single light attack. This makes the combat just complicated enough that I had to consider what attacks I had access to in any given form. Luckily, changing forms is literally a button press away, and swapping attacks takes only seconds in the pause menu. I was never out of the action for long, even planning for the most frantic of battles. Like any good dungeon crawler, there are a ton of battles to plow through. Dungeons themselves are relatively simple. Most of them are procedurally generated mazes that reset when you die, with lock and key puzzles and dozens if not hundreds of enemies to defeat sometimes. And often, there are NPCs hanging out in these dungeons, with quests to bestow upon you. The amount of dungeons directly corresponds to how large the overworld map is. That is to say, the map is surprisingly huge, and therefore, there are a lot of dungeons to clear. Most exciting are the dungeons that have modifiers. Every dungeon has a really distinct look on the outside, like the Eldritch Gourd or the Busted Robot. The ones that stand out the most are those with different rules once you step inside, like the dungeon where every enemy explodes upon defeat via corpse explosion, or the one dungeon where all damage is multiplied by 9,999, meaning everything is a one-hit kill to the player, but also to the enemies as well. Preparing for and then clearing these optional side dungeons is a great way to test your skills.
But if it sounds like I'm about to complain at the sheer height of the wall I was climbing, let me cut myself off, because Nobody Saves the World felt frictionless almost all the way through. Dungeons take like 5 minutes maximum to clear out. With a good build, you can tear through enemies in ways that feel very, very satisfying, and raking up the different forms never feels like grinding. Even though it mechanically is, there's no other way to describe defeating 100 or more enemies with the same attack. Within that, ranks improve regularly. It simply doesn't feel taxing or time wasting.
Part of what makes everything go down so smoothly is the perfect presentation. Drinkbox has always had an eye for style, and seeing how they skewer fantasy tropes is perfect. Everyone, from shopkeepers to sorcerers' apprentices to random citizens, have funny dialogue or ironic references. It's rare for any game's writing to make me chuckle, let alone laugh out loud, but Nobody Saves the World absolutely did from start to finish. Consider the quest, where I had to take form of a horse to fall in love with another horse. The art direction in general perfectly works to send up tropes. Take this training hall, where there are swords hung up as decor. Recognize any? Well, we've got the Master Sword, the blade from Transistor, the Energy Beam Sword from Halo, and even Cloud's frickin' Buster Sword. Drinkbox loves games, and I appreciated this little nod to the shared hobby we all enjoy. I don't know what you would call this. It's not exactly a visual gag, but the absurdism of seeing the most iconic swords in gaming shrunken down and reproduced in this world is kind of funny to me. Last one I'll call out, a reference to the studio's biggest hit, 2D Metroidvania Guacamelee. There's a soda machine in the Wizard Tower selling a special fruit-flavored drink, and that drink is called Guava Melee. I understood that reference. The constant feeling of progression and non-stop jokes feels satisfying through and through. Best of all, Nobody Saves the World taps into the universal appeal of watching the numbers go up. With so many experience bars, quests to fulfill, and shiny new ranks, I always felt like I was working towards completion even by just exploring. Hell, there's even a quest to complete for simply moving around through the water in mermaid form. You're saying that I get something for doing something I was already planning on doing already? Yeah, I want that. Leveling up in Nobody Saves the World feels wonderful. There were so many moments where the minute I knocked out a quest, I didn't give a shit. I excitedly opened the menu and I pressed the level up button. As far as individual base level, the max level is 75. And that does sound like a lot, but truth be told, the game tends to scale with you relatively well. So you'll never have moments of feeling overpowered or broken. Instead, those moments of feeling great come into play the moment you figure out which passives and action skills you combine across all of your classes. In conjunction with this, if you're struggling to complete the side quests or gain experience, you can purchase quests from the shopkeeper that are literally infinite. For doing anything, walking, opening chests, collecting money, mana, health, even defeating enemy wards. The game is very encouraging to see you get to that finish line. As you progress further and further through the story and the game, you'll come across finding these little mana fairies. Each time you collect one, your mana base stat goes up by just a little bit, and although that sounds super lame, it really helps out some of the more mana-hungry classes who are in the glass cannon side of things. And for as large as the map is, I was able to find all 35 mana fairies, almost all of them with relative ease. I guess what I'm getting at is, this is one of those games that is so good through and through, you don't need a guide to complete. And that to me is the sign of a true game. This emergent gameplay, where I unlocked more and more tools the longer I played, is my absolute favorite kind of thing. As a single player experience, this would be more than enough. But Nobody Saves the World was also built with co-op in mind, which takes the completion experience to an entirely new level. Some of my favorite memories from the past are completing Diablo 2 with my brother, my friends, and really anyone I could convince to join my party. Obviously, playing Diablo 2 Resurrected these days carries a little more baggage than playing the original game. But the fact is, isometric dungeon crawlers are simply way more fun to play and complete with additional people at your side, and Nobody Saves the World understands that. Playing this game in co-op elevates everything about it. Crashing through the 5 master dungeons is so much easier with a pal. Linking up with someone online is very easy to do. If you have another person on your team, the game amps up the difficulty by flooding you with extra enemies, but overcoming the extra challenge feels awesome. Figuring out the meta of what you're facing together is a joy. Understanding which combinations and forms work best as a team is part of what makes this genre of games so appealing in the first place. There's nothing like blasting through waves of enemies as a majestic horse and gross zombie, neighing and nomming all of our way to glory. Best of all, You don't have to spend time grinding your partner's levels to match your own. The game defaults to match with what the host of the lobby has. This saves hours of time and gives people like me, who are going to go the extra mile to complete everything, more incentive to bring along a friend. There is literally no downside, no issues, or slowdown. In fact, playing with a friend can power level classes that much more. It just works. I love sharing fun experiences in games with other people, and Nobody Saves the World really wants players to do that. It just feels like a party in co-op, and the incredible music and fun atmosphere make the entire experience feel very home-y. I do have a few complaints, however. First one being that at the time of this recording, co-op is limited to online. This game is screaming for couch co-op, and I hope that there's an eventual patch that will address this somehow. I was completing this game on the Xbox version, and I was shocked to see there was no local co-op. It's a bummer, but I do not think it's a deal breaker by any means. To continue the co-op conversation, when you are playing online with a friend, you'll notice that some classes, should you and a friend decide to play both of the same class at the same time, variants of costume skins aren't very appealing or different. Oftentimes, I'd be stupid and forget which character I was, despite the indicator number and color. I kind of wish I could pick my colors for that flair. Hell, I would even take stupid little costume pieces like gigantic hats or vests, just something to help me identify my personal character that I'm invested in. I think my favorite thing about Nobody Saves the World is that the entire game is playable from start to finish in co-op, and I completed this entire game with a friend. This made my first playthrough of 27 hours of gameplay fly by very quickly. This truly is the kind of experience where you blink and suddenly 3 hours have melted away. Once I was in the zone, I barely even thought about how the 18 classes had 80 abilities to unlock between them all, and how each of those abilities needed to be upgraded a lot, which, as far as completing goes, it wasn't that bad. Every single active and passive ability requires upgrade tokens that, starting out, seem very difficult to get, as they are rare spawns from enemy drops or specific quests and chests will give you anywhere from 3 to 5 of them each. But once you've purchased all of the various stat upgrades and passives available from the shopkeeper, any access money you have, you can just spend $1,000 on for 5 upgrade tokens. Now that sounds like a lot of money for little tokens, but each ability is upgradable at least 3 times, with the token requirement climbing more and more with each level. I don't know the exact amount, but I want to confidently say I ended up getting somewhere between 750 to 1,000 upgradable tokens in order to max out every single move in the game. I have to guess because depending on the skill, the requirement will go up. However, that's not required for the achievements, as the achievements require you to complete at least one class's upgrades and passives totally. But I'm me. You guys know I'm crazy, so I upgraded everything. There is one thing Nobody Saves the World didn't really need, and that, my friends, is a new game plus. I've already saved the world, so doing so again with more enemies that are harder to kill doesn't make for a much more meaningful experience, especially when you almost completely max your player level and all your classes before the end of your very first playthrough. New Game Plus also changes the mechanics of the dungeons pretty significantly. See, when you level up a class via a quest or complete a main story quest, you'll need to use these star rods in order to open one of the big 5 main story quest dungeons. However, in New Game Plus mode, you can't get star rods from class levels or quests, as the game assumes you've already done this once before. So the only way to get star rods that you need to unlock these dungeons is that you have to beat every single side dungeon in the game. Each side dungeon gives you 10 to 15 star rods. Now the big caveat to this is that every single dungeon now has a bunch of insane modifiers. Oh my god, this is so hard. It's so difficult. I don't see myself being able to. I'm just freaking kidding. I got max level before the game was up, and I've upgraded everything. All it takes is the right loadout, and it's easy peasy. This was very fun, actually, despite it being just that padding that you'd get in a game like this. Now, to be clear, it took me about 12 hours to clear New Game Plus, so it wasn't that bad. However, I'm a dummy that left my Xbox on, and my save file says it took me 37 hours. So, yeah, I'm an idiot. Which, by the way, future players who are playing this game on Game Pass or wherever you're playing it, you want a tip on power leveling your classes? Find the Expanse Cave. It's the green cave that you have to light the torches up in. I was able to effectively level all of my classes to S rank just in this cave alone, in just an hour or so, including one of the most broken classes in the game, and the final class, the dragon. Yeah, it's real fun. But I digress. The entire nature of New Game Plus and the reason behind completing the game a second time is achievements. With that in mind, there are 33 achievements in the game, all of which are very easy to get, with that last one on your path probably leading to just getting that New Game Plus playthrough done. For the most part, Nobody Saves the World is in fact one of those games where completing it and the journey you go on is its own reward. Yes, you don't get anything big for doing everything the game has to offer, but it's fulfilling to max out class ranks because it directly helped me to complete the game, while also making you want to see every single class and their abilities and how they all mix and match. The combat becomes so much more satisfying when you have everything at your disposal. An answer to every question, unlocking each form, leveling them up from F to S, 6 ranks total, 18 times across the board, feels like getting a gold star on an attendance sheet. Pretty easy, but look at what a good job I did. I showed up. I do wish there was some kind of ultimate form or the like, but as it stands, there is nothing for completionists to claim as a 100% reward. Just the power and the glory of getting every single achievement in the game.
I'm just so thrilled to finally be able to talk about Nobody Saves the World at length here on the show. This kind of game is absolutely one of my favorite genres, and seeing a new one in the space feels really awesome. It's especially awesome when the game is extremely good, as is the case here. It's fun and funny, packed with enough stuff to be satisfying, but not so much that it's overwhelming. Drinkbox clearly poured a lot of love and time into this game, and that dedication has really paid off. I wish there was a more tangible reward for hitting every single achievement and for maxing everything that I could in the game, but at the end of the day, this game is still a blast, especially when you're playing with a friend. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of complete it.
Complete it!